Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Now, joining me in studio is David Knight, and I wanted to bring David in to just kind of have a casual conversation about some of the things that I'm finding really disturbing on the internet. I find the greatest stories on Twitter. Well, the Drug Enforcement Agency has now come up with the most insane argument against legalizing medicinal marijuana. They are now saying that if Utah decides to legalize marijuana, rabbits will get stoned. And this is a big problem. So Utah...
I think we got a new metaphor.
Yeah.
Instead of jumping the shark, we need to talk now in the future about stoning the bunnies.
Yes.
Because this is so over-the-top absurd, and trying to push this. This is beyond anything we saw on Happy Days. I mean, this is... To say that we have to not legalize it because the bunnies are going to get stoned, because we're going to have a large number of fields that are there. Maybe they should talk to the U.S. military and ask them what's going on in Afghanistan with all the poppy fields that they're helping the people grow there, because they got a bumper crop.
Since when are they concerned about cuddly little baby bunnies? Now, the DEA is freaking out about this bill that Utah, it's really referring to the edible form of marijuana, and this is what people want to use to help them medicinally. But they're so against this. And this is something that this is their argument, that they went out to these fields where the bunny rabbits were, and they noticed that they were just sitting there. They were just really cool with the fact that humans were approaching them. And so then they said that they stole the marijuana crop away. They tried to take all the marijuana away from the rabbit, and they were just stunned because the rabbit just sat there. And this is what their big concern is that wildlife might start to cultivate a taste for the herb, and then they'll lose their natural inhibitions, and they won't be afraid of humans anymore.
I guess this explains why Jeb Bush opposed medical marijuana in Florida. You know, he and Sheldon Adelson, the big casino owner in Nevada. But, you know, Rand Paul called out Jeb Bush on his hypocrisy at CPAC, saying, how dare you withhold something that is very effective, the most effective, the safest medication that people can have for certain illnesses, withhold that from them. At the same time, you admit that you did it recreationally when you were at this posh school that you were going to. Nothing happened to Jeb Bush. And you know what? Nothing happened to Jeb Bush's daughter when she was caught with her prescription drug problem. The only person that got in any trouble was a reporter who pointed it out. The fact that they gave, I think it was, I can't remember what the amount was, but it was a large amount of money that they gave to the judge who was, to his charity, the judge that was presiding over her case. So there's a lot of corruption. Jeb Bush is Exhibit A, but you know, they're coming up with all kinds of absurd things to argue against the use of marijuana now, because they understand they're losing it. Right. People are seeing through the hypocrisy. They're seeing through the mean-spiritedness of it, withholding something that is very effective for medication, even extending it to things that don't have hallucinogens in them, like hemp, that are competitors to the paper industry, to the textiles industry, understanding that we have totally been sold a bill of goods for the last half century.
Right, and people are seeing through the elitist hypocrisy of it. You can buy your way out of going to prison if you've got enough money, and it does have a lot of medicinal use as well as a lot of other things that you mentioned. And they really are coming out on the defensive now, desperate to roll this back, desperate to convince people that this is a dangerous thing, even going so far as to say, you know, cuddly little baby bunnies are now going to be our friends, and as if that's a problem. And we saw on Fox News, they actually rolled out one of their medical experts to talk about a new study. A new study showed that marijuana was the least harmful of all of the common drugs, and he had a big problem with this. And listen to his very scientific explanation.
pot may be safer for you than you think, according to a brand new study.
They're using a lethal dose as a comparison. For example, they're putting pot or weed against cocaine or alcohol and smoking. So we know that you need less amount of alcohol to die. So they're using death as a measure to see what's dangerous and what's not in this particular
study. Okay, so how is it dangerous? Forgetting death.
Now we have crack babies coming in because pregnant women are smoking this whole marijuana business.
So that was Fox News' medical expert.
Yeah, medical expert. Okay. He knows about as much as their intelligence expert knows about the NSA and the effects of that stuff. That's amazing. Yeah, they're trying to create a new reefer madness, aren't they?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
they're desperate to get this back. You've got Oklahoma and Nebraska appealing to the Supreme Court saying the federal government, the Supreme Court, needs to shut down these bills, these laws that have been passed by referenda. I talked to Jim Garrock. He's going to be our guest later in the program because, of course, he's a former prosecutor in Chicago. I want to talk to him about the black site there. And, of course, the black site has roots in the corruption that comes from the war on drugs. But one of the things that I had, Leanne, that was an epiphany was the fact that this is something that has really been driven by the UN. You remember last fall when these initiatives were winning everywhere, everybody was outraged that the UN said, federal government needs to shut this down at the state levels. We can't have this. It's like, who are you to talk to us about this? You don't have a dog in this fight. This is none of your business. Well, it actually began with the UN. It's like UN Agenda 21. They created this agenda. He's going to Jim Garrock from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition is going to this convention. They have an annual meeting since 1946. This is going to be in Vienna. They've been talking about narcotics. And in 1961, they created a convention, a treaty that all the nations signed on to that essentially was the same template that we adopted here 9-10 years later when the war on drugs was officially declared by Richard Nixon with the drug scheduling, saying Schedule I drugs like marijuana, they're going to be prohibited and that sort of thing. I never really paid attention to the war on drugs until the mid-'80s when Reagan came after the end users instead of going after the suppliers. And when he started destroying the rule of law with civil asset forfeiture, creating the mandatory minimums and everything, that was a total outrage, total destruction of our legal system. But I never realized before I started looking at this and what Jim Garrock is doing, because he's going to go to the top level. I think we need to fight it at the state level.
Right.
Absolutely. But I think it's a good thing to go to the top level and say, this isn't working. You guys know it's not working.
Right. Well, that's how they work, too. They put us in a vice. So we need to start doing that to them as well, pushing against the top and the bottom. And, of course, that's what this is all about. The DEA is worried about that constant revenue stream that comes, from entrapment and arrests. Of course, just propping
all these
up
governments say, we have to do this because it's part of the UN treaty and everything. They love it. It's a very effective piece of control for them to come in, as we see here in America, but it happens in all the different countries. But I never really realized that it was an agenda, just like their climate agenda, that's coming from the UN, IPCC, just like gun control, the police. I mean, over and over and over again, there's these agendas that are created by the UN, and then they leave it to the local, because they don't have any way to enforce this stuff. They don't have any UN police yet, okay? Once they get their global tax, that's probably one of the first things that they'll fund.
Yeah. Well, at least the good thing with this is that people are finally starting to see through this false war on drugs.
They've stoned the bunny. They have stoned the bunny now, and it's jumped the shark.
Well, thanks for joining me, and we will definitely have you back in studio to break down some of the more bizarre stories out there in the internet land. But stick around, because coming right up, David Knight will be in studio with Jim Garrock.
Another major health threat, this one in Toledo, Ohio, where everybody in the entire city has been told not to drink the water.
Ohio's governor declaring a state of emergency.
Did you know that the average person uses about 80 to 100 gallons of water at home every single day? If there's a water emergency, will you be prepared?
Panicked residents forming long lines throughout the day.
We're here at a supermarket in Toledo. You can see the shelves empty where water once was.
To stay safe and healthy during a crisis, you must have access to safe, clean water. Water which will not be available at your local grocery store.
There's a mad dash on right now to stock up on supplies.
The ProPure Pro 1 G2.0 water filtration system is a must-have for every modern, independently minded household. Protect your family's safety during an emergency. Go to InfoWarsStore.com today to purchase your ProPure Pro 1 G2.0 water filtration system, or call 1-888-253-3139.